Extra time.
Hello and welcome back to the Extra Time podcast. This week presented by me, Henry Hill. Now, eagle-eyed viewers will know this could mean that Pat has had a baby, but that isn't actually the case. He just didn't want to talk to you all today. He just didn't want to be here. So it's been left to me to take the reins for my first Extra Time pod. But luckily, joining me today is Will Brazier, big fan of the channel, big friend of the channel, in fact. Big fan too, I hope. Will, how's it going? Is it good to be back on FD content?
Mate, absolutely love it. I was on Winners and Losers earlier, and I actually called this an asset, which I'd like to formally apologise to you, Pat, and everyone for that absolute terrible sort of creative media slogan there, and I'd just like to be reprimanded for that. So, but very excited. Championship, I don't often get to talk about it, especially on FD, so I'm ready, willing and able.
Love that. Yeah, well, we've been trying to up our championship content recently. As a Fulham fan, I probably need to brush up on my knowledge of it ahead of next season. Actually, by the time this goes out, we will have played Burnley, so it could all be over by then. And obviously, as a Birmingham fan, you know a thing or two about being down there. And this weekend produced, I would say, one of the games of the season because that game between Derby and Sheffield Wednesday literally had everything, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, going into the last weekend, there's normally a few more permutations on the line, especially in the Championship, whether it's those automatic places, who's going to get the final playoff places. But this year it was just a big focus on the relegation battle, which, you know, could have been a bit damp. But, I mean, when it was almost a playoff in itself, wasn't it, between Derby and Sheffield Wednesday. Add Rotherham into the mix, who'd had all those games delayed. I think they were 4 behind for so long, and then they'd got to this stage where they were in touching distance of staying up. But I mean, the drama unfolded in the game and back and forth. Derby ultimately staying up, but that is why, Henry, the Championship is the best league in the world, and you should be so grateful you're coming back down to it. No VAR, just focus on the positives, mate.
The way I view it is, it's like Fulham build up the courage to move out of their family home, get scared in the big city, then go running back to their parents, which is the Championship. You know, like those nice home securities. So that's the way I'm like tempering the potential relegation with it. But yeah, you're so right. That game, to give a bit of context going into it, for people who weren't following, Derby, Sheffield Wednesday, and Rotherham all in the mix of staying up. I think Wycombe I think they needed the sort of everything to go in their favour and a ginormous goal difference change. It was never really going to happen, but for a long time, it looked like Rotherham were actually going to pull it off because Wayne Rooney's Derby just couldn't get the win they needed to guarantee their place. They went behind, then they went back up. Martin Waghorn inspired them to a 2-1 victory by the 52nd minute. Meanwhile, Rotherham have taken the lead against Cardiff City in a game that I think a lot of us thought would be maybe a step too far for them. Mick McCarthy had made Cardiff quite a difficult place to go and perform. So it looked like Derby were going back into it, but then in what's kind of been a typical performance for Derby, they blew their leads, with 21 minutes to go. Callum Patterson and Julian Borner turned the tide once more. It looks like Sheffield Wednesday are just relying on Cardiff to get something from Rotherham in order to stay up there. But then heartbreak for Rotherham on the 88th minute when Marlon Pax swept home from the edge of the area to bring the Bluebirds level. It was amazing. I don't know if you saw the highlights, but the ball dropped to him and the Rotherham player in the background had already got his hands on his head in anticipation almost for the heartbreak to come. And it did pull off. But I mean, fair play to Rotherham. They posted 17 shots with 4 on target, but they just couldn't double their lead. And they actually opened the scoring from a pretty amazing Lewis Wing dipping volley there too. Roll back to Pride Park. It's all happening there once more. Martin Waghorn scores a penalty on the 78th minute, which moved them out of the drop, and that's how it ended. Meanwhile, Wycombe won 3-0 away at Middlesbrough to leave them just in 22nd in the table. And that's actually just a quick word on Wycombe. Although they have got relegated, a brilliant first season for them in a division I don't think any of us gave them much of a chance in.
Yeah, I think the main thing for them is that you compare the resources between 21st and 22nd, which is Derby and Wycombe, and it's an absolutely outstanding job to get promoted late because of the playoffs in League One. And, they had a fantastic season, but, getting into those playoffs, maybe they thought they'd blown their chance of promotion. And then to get up, the season started so rotten for them. They couldn't buy a win. And then I think there was a bit of a change in formation for them. Gareth Ainsworth, who's fantastic anyway, because even when they're going through those losses, I've been lucky enough to go down there and see the training ground and see the group of them together. They're just so united and so focused. And Gareth Ainsworth's the sort of perfect man manager, like the modern man manager. And he kept that together, tweaked the tactics, and then it just started clicking. I was very unfortunate enough to watch Wycombe beat us 2-1 at St Andrews early on in the season. And then from there, they managed to start picking up points. But, I mean, to finish 22nd, although it is relegation, well, I think we'll come on to something in a minute, it might not be. But it's fantastic for them and just a great platform for them to build for League One and the squad that they're building as well to hopefully come back up.
No, absolutely. And if we, like you said, the resources that Derby had at their disposal, although they have stayed up, it's impossible to look at this as a good season. It's just been an absolute car crash on and off the pitch for them, certainly over the last, feels like 18 months really. Obviously there's that car crash for the players, literal car crash. Saw Richard Keogh and stuff move on. It just didn't really work out for Philip Cocu. And then Wayne Rooney, obviously this was meant to be his big moment in management. I mean, where do you think it goes from here? Because to have had to get through via a 3-3 draw on the final day of the season, it's not a glowing endorsement of his managerial credentials. You know, they went into this game with 6 straight defeats for the weekend showdown, and it's 1 win and 3 draws and 11 defeats in their last 15. Considering how well he did at the start to get them out of the drop zone, 6 wins in his first 9 games in sole charge, it is difficult. And Colin Kazim Richards, their top scorer at 8. Where do you think Derby goes, certainly with Wayne Rooney, from this point on?
Well, I think it's quite strange because he came in and, like you said, he had the bounce, which they started winning games. Again, just refer back to Blues. I remember they beat, I think they were 3-0 up after 20 minutes at St Andrews at one stage. And the new manager, I remember having a chat with, I say an unnamed source because I don't want to ruin their credentials, but they were talking about Derby for the playoffs at one point. Such was the bounce. I think he's almost got a bit of a free hit this season because that squad he inherited halfway through. Plus you add on what you spoke about with Mel Morris trying to sell the club and there was a potential buyer who's pulled out and that's been going back and forth for ages and that does take a toll on the club. So I think for next season, hopefully it's a clean slate and like you said, they just need the striking options are aging. They have a few bright sparks in there, but it's not the Derby County that we've come to. I'm not going to say know and love because that'll be a step too far. But know in the Championship, who've got that good core of a squad with the young loans and young players, but then that experience. But this year it just seems to just be an absolute show and just bring it all together. And I think with Rooney, just to finish, it was the fact that he got them out and then he almost brought them back in because they had so many leads against different teams where they could have. This shouldn't have been a final day scenario for them, but it ended up being that way and. Skin of the teeth stuff.
Really low on confidence. You're right. They just need to hit the reset button. Sort of backroom staff as well. I think Rooney deserves a summer window to try and at least figure out what's going on. Get maybe some of the players that he wants in and go from there. Because it has to be relying on some Martin Waghorn brilliance in the last day of the season. I'm just not sure that is the recipe for success. Philip Cocu was a good manager as well, and he can get anything done there. But if we look at the other side that have gone down, Sheffield Wednesday, really rotten luck actually. I've a lot on social media about this 6-point deduction for breaching EFL profitability and sustainability regulations. I think it was 12 points, got lowered to 6, and the reality is if that hadn't happened they would have survived. If we just park that for a second, it's still a difficult season for them. They went through Gary Monk, Tony Pulis. I think Darren Moore's a brilliant manager. I really hope he is given that opportunity to bring them back up next season as well. But it does just look like a lot of poor strategy and planning behind the scenes at Sheffield Wednesday for a while now. If you look at their side, not much young talent really knocking around in that team, and they'll be back in the third tier for the first time in 11 years. I mean, what do you think about Sheffield Wednesday, and what do you think about this points deduction? Because I think that is the most intriguing thing, which could lead into something else you wanted to talk about as well.
Well, I think it's hard for me, Henry, because Birmingham got given a points deduction, so I think I almost come from it from a different slant where I want you to have a points deduction, you to have a point, not quite that bad, but it's if they've set the precedent of deducting points for that method and for what Sheffield Wednesday done, you sort of sticking to the rules that you writ. But It comes back to even tying into the Super League stuff, isn't it? Where you can't deduct points from the club because it affects the fans, and well, that's what happens in the Championship at the moment. On the pitch, they've obviously been gunning for promotion so many times. I think back to, I was at Hillsborough when they played Huddersfield Town, when they were odds-on favourite to beat them in the semi-finals, lost that. They've had so many opportunities, and again, there's been a few clubs in the Championship where they've gone big players sort of maybe falling from the Premier League or come across from Europe, where they put big wages on and gambled, and it's not paid off. And the last season and a half, last 2 seasons, is where we've really seen that just fall apart, and the managers that they've gone through, and it's just trying to put square pegs in round holes, and it's not worked. Like you said, I do think the bright light for them going into League One is Darren Moore, absolutely fantastic manager, and you know, he's got the chance to sort of really lift everything again. Another club that needs to reset, get some of the older players out, get them big wages out, and long term, just because of the money they spent, it could be a positive for them. But League One is becoming like the Championship as well, where it's just you go down and you could get stuck.
Yeah, you're right. I remember that Carlos Carvajal era at Sheffield Wednesday. Was it Forestieri up top? They were pretty exciting. Do you think potentially there may be some ramifications coming towards Derby in terms of their own breaches of the policy, which could be good news for Wycombe? Well,
yeah, it's been reported this morning, I think, by the Daily Mail that EFL have been in a court case against Derby for financial irregularities, easy for me to say, and EFL have won, which could mean a points deduction. It's literally as we press record, wasn't it, Henry? So we've not done too much research into it, but it could mean that there's a points deduction for Derby this season, which, remarkably, after everything finished, it would mean that Wycombe could stay in the Championship. But it's like you said, well, I think it's like we were touching on earlier, like Blues have had their points deduction, Sheffield Wednesday have had their points deduction, and the sort of cases and the evidence were stacking up against Derby County, not just from this season, but from seasons past. And I think many people feel that they should have had something, but it's a strange bit of timing for it to happen now.
Yeah, sort of dodgy regulations going on with the selling of the stadium. Obviously, that Wayne Rooney kind of 32 bet payment system. Yeah. They didn't pay the players for 6 weeks up to Christmas as well. So like I said, maybe need a bit of a reset there. But another season of Akin Fenwell potentially in the Championship. You know, you'd love to see it. Hopefully. Anyway, let's park the relegated sides for now, because I thought, Will, we could just have a look at the rest of the table. Let's look at the promoted sides, the playoffs, and maybe talk about some of the other stories which probably get overlooked by the regular viewer. Let's kick off with Norwich City. I mean, I don't think we have to spend too much longer. They're just simply too good for the Championship, weren't they? I think it was really sensible to hold on to Daniel Farke. I think he's a brilliant manager. And actually, if you look, they only lost Ben Godfrey and Jamal Lewis from the core of that squad that got into the Premier League. And a few sort of tidy additions in there. Oliver Skipp coming in, has played brilliantly all season. They held on to someone like Max Aarons. I've wrote this down because this is mental. He's played 4,049 league minutes this season. That is only one game he hasn't appeared in. That's a serious amount of football for a one player. If you consider the Premier League, you're looking at about 2,500 minutes there. But he's excellent. Timo Pukki, 26 goals, 4 assists. Buendia as well. I mean, I guess what I just want to ask you is how you think Norwich could cope in the Prem next year. Because they have another... Farke will know what he's on about this time around. I personally think they could easily... I think staying up should be not beyond the realms of possibility for them next year, because they actually played good football. They just got unstuck with their defence, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think they've kept that core squad, staff, and even up to the top with like Stuart Webber. The way it's run, I absolutely love Norwich. I'll be supporting Norwich in the Premier League next season. The way the club's run, they do everything right, and when they don't do it right, they learn from their mistakes. And I think they spoke about... when they went up last year, they maybe held on to a few players that they shouldn't have for loyalty or for one reason and another. They've already got rid of like Tete and Vranic. Is it? Yes,
it was certainly Tete that they've agreed to let go, and I completely agree with you. It's about facing up to the reality of the task ahead of them. Just saying to some of these guys, sorry, like you've come as far. But I mean, if they could hold on to people like Buendia. And Max Aarons, there's a lot of talk that he might go to Everton. I've seen sort of transfer rumours there. But if they could hold on to players like Buendia, you've got to say, they could be quite difficult to handle when it comes to certainly like the lower end of the Premier League.
Yeah, definitely. And I think most of those players, like you've mentioned, have been in the Premier League as well. So that's such a positive for them going forward, where they know the league a little bit better. And when they came up last year, they obviously tried to play the Norwich way. And for some bits of the season, it did work. And I just think everything that they've learned, that core that they've kept together, it's just an exciting proposition. I think if you're not an Ipswich fan, you'd be very excited for Norwich going forward. I mean, Pukki was bagging even in the Premier League last time around.
Yeah.
Wendia he's an absolute magician. Max Aaron's, I mean, he's just getting minutes. What is he? Max Aaron's 21, 22, and he's got all
21.
those minutes under the belt. I mean, you look at the likes of like Dele Alli that did it. So, I mean, Dele Alli's still only 25, 26, but we think of him as like a 36-year-old, the amount of minutes that they've got under the belt. So, all that experience, everything's going the right way. It's such a well-run club. They've learnt from their lessons. Everything just seems to be so positive for them. And I really do hope that they can, like you said, stay up, but maybe like look what Leeds have done or Sheffield United the season before and really spring a surprise in the Premier League.
Yeah, they'll just maybe need a bit more of a backbone. I think, as Fulham have shown, you can play excellent football and still get relegated. Oh dear, that's definitely not true. But yeah, I mean, similar vibes. Just couldn't score enough. But if we look at the other team, it's definitely going up. Watford, a bit of a different story actually, because they did lose Decore, Estupinian, Craig Dawson as well, gone to West Ham, but brilliant. Gerard Deulofeu, the sort of that relationship they got with Udinese, where they sort of shift players either side, don't they, sort of depending on what division they're in. Or Roberto Pereira as well, who's pretty handy for a lot of the time. But they did manage to hold on to Ismaili Sarr, 13 goals, 4 assists, really good. I'm amazed that they held on to him. I don't know about you, but he's class, isn't he? And actually, this Francisco Ciaralta, he's been a brilliant addition at centre-back there. They've equalled the championship record for the best defence. What I wanted to ask you about, though, just when they fired Vladimir Ivic after just 22 games, I was just thinking, oh, here go the Pozzo family again, trigger happy. And then they announced that Zisco is arriving from Dinamo Tbilisi, where he's had 11 games in charge. You are looking at that thinking, no way is that pulling off. But fair play to Zisco. I think he's been one of the discoveries of the season, wherever you are. I mean, he's been unreal.
Yeah, I think it, like you said, it was that decision, wasn't it? It could have gone one of two ways, and it was the right thing to do. I think that, I mean, I'm taking this from Ben Foster Vlogs, but the mood of the camp just seemed to change instantaneously, and he got it right. They kept going, and I mean, there was 3 or 4 clubs that have slipped into the playoffs, where, especially like Bournemouth and Brentford, and even maybe Swansea at one point, Reading as well, and it seemed to be around that time where they made the decision to change manager. Watford just kicked on, and then the gap just got too big, and they're going back to the Premier League. When the relegation happened last year, and it was Norwich and Watford, I really did think they'd struggle this year, just because of the sort of overload of talent and the turmoil. But like, you keeping Ismail Assar in the chat is a cheat code. It's not fair.
Yeah,
I mean, the quality of what's he been linked with 80, 90 million pound moves is absolutely staggering. So to keep him, and they're offering him Premier League football again next season, so I'd imagine he'll stick around.
Yeah, I think they'll need another goal scorer. That's my concern. They can't be relying on him. Deeney's not getting any younger. So I think, I'm not sure, I mean, I'm sure the Pozzo family, you never quite know what transfers they're going to bring in. But I do think if Watford are going to kick on, they will need a goal scorer. But once again, sort of the core of that squad isn't too dissimilar to the one that went down. I mean, how do you reckon they'll get on back in the Premier League? Because they sort of limped to relegation last year, didn't they? Sort of out of nowhere, having got to the FA Cup final, all just sort of went horribly wrong.
Yeah, I think for a couple of seasons they were sort of almost establishing themselves, and then after that FA Cup run, it all sort of went really badly for them. But I do worry for Watford next season. Like you said, with the goal scorers, that's going to be them. With Norwich, just to go back to them, you can see where the goals could potentially come from. Watford are the same, but it feels like a lot of that Premier League squad that, I don't know, didn't set the world on fire. You weren't exactly praising them when they went down. So I'd love them to stay up. Troy Deeney, big blue nose, he could lead them to victory. But yeah, like you said, the transfer dark arts of them, I mean, who knows, could they end up there. So that's one to keep an eye out for.
Well, if you go down into the playoffs, one team that seems to get it right in the transfer window is Brentford. Get it right in a big way, don't they? They're going to be lining up against Bournemouth in the first of the playoffs there. Oh, we've got to talk about Ivan Toney, don't we? I mean, what a striker. Unreal. I'm so happy he broke the records this weekend. 31 goals. He's beating Glenn Murray's record. Unlucky Glenn there. But he's also got 10 assists as well. I mean, Ivan Toney, what do you make of him? Because I reckon he would cost more than the 28 million initial price that they received for Ollie Watkins. I mean, in my opinion, he's as good.
Yeah, I think it's a different one because they're slightly different strikers, aren't they? Where Toney is and he's definitely not just this, but he's that sort of, poacher, goal scorer, target man, a load of roles bundled into one, where Ollie Watkins could maybe play across that front three. So maybe that's where you get a little bit more value on Watkins for. But 31 goals in the Championship, and to be 25 years old as well, there's so much more to come from him. And even in that Carabao Cup run where they got to the semi-finals, they played against Spurs. They were so unlucky to be defeated to them. So if they can navigate their way through the playoffs, the quality's there again with everyone. And they just seem to... the method that they use is far and above my brain power, Henry. But they churn out talent and they know where to get it from and they bring it in and it fits the system. And they just keep going.
Yeah, I think Toney cost an initial 5 million from Peterborough. Potential that's almost double. But yeah,
31 goals.
Yeah, unreal. And it's interesting what you say about him being a poacher, because he joked about that in the tweet he put out. He said, poacher the box here and there. I've watched all of his goals back. There's a lot of penalties. He's got that confident kind of walk-up swagger style. But they're all like clinical finishes. And it takes a lot of skill to be that person in the box in the right place, doesn't it? I mean, different strikers, we herald it for that being one of their big things. I mean, look at sort of the Bundesliga, you've got Weghorst for Wolfsburg. He only seems to score goals from in the box, kind of similar with Andre Silva at Eintracht Frankfurt. Someone like Jermaine Defoe, who was that kind of clinical in that area. I personally think it's a little unfair that Toney's been brushed with that kind of idea, because they're all clean strikes. Even when he's at left foot, right foot with his header, he's kind of got like a little bit of everything, I think.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and I don't think it's a knock on his talent. I just think with comparing him to Watkins, I think many people could, and it might be a disservice to Watkins, but see him across that front three from like a winger, even in behind. But I mean, if Toney's available for 25 for even 30 million.
Yeah.
With the record he's got, and like you said, the highlight reel, I mean, there's going to be a lot of Premier League teams sniffing around if Brentford don't get promoted.
That's right. I find it so funny that he was on Newcastle's books until a few years ago. I bet they can't.
Oh, yeah. But they got Joe Linton now, so everything's all right.
Yeah, that is definitely true. Will Brazier original, that. They've got Brian Mbeumo as well. He's still only like 21 years old too. Scored 8, assisted 10. Sergi Canos, an old Liverpool player, 9 goals, 8 assists, 24 years old. So you do feel like even if they don't get promoted, they'll sort of go again in a funny way. But if we look at who they're up against in Bournemouth, Jonathan Woodgate doesn't look like he's resurrected his career as a manager. 12 wins in 21 games. That's 3 more than he managed in 41 at Middlesbrough. A bit of a stinker over there. And he's even got, Dominic Solanke finally coming good. 15 goals, 8 assists. Dan Juma, who they bought for the Premier League, obviously got relegated. He looks like he's really coming into his form there. 15 goals, 7 assists. Whether or not you have an opinion on it, I'm not sure. But Jonathan Woodgate, it is nice to see that kind of resurrection and redemption for him, because it did look after Middlesbrough that it wasn't going to go anywhere far with his managerial ambitions. Yeah,
and the squad he's inherited, it almost felt a little bit like these players going down from the Premier League could flourish a lot more in the Championship, especially with Dominic Solanke finally getting the goals, finally scoring, and Dan Juma as well, who was a bit out in the cold. No one was getting too excited about him, but just given the game time, given the confidence, they've been scoring a lot of goals and creating a lot as well. And to see Woodgate at the helm doing it, it's a football manager's wet dreams. Just seeing playing the game, seeing Rooney, Woodgate in the league, you sometimes have to pinch yourself.
Yeah, it is amazing to see that kind of generation coming through. All right, I'm going for Brentford in this one. 12 games unbeaten. Bournemouth sort of lapsed a little bit since they got back into the formations. But are you going to go for Brentford too in this one?
Is that not controversial for you as a Fulham fan, Henry, to pick Brentford?
Like all posh sounding people, it's important to have a West London representative, which isn't just Chelsea in the top flight. So yeah, you know what? I respect like Brentford enough for what they've done and the way they go about their business that I'm not going to hammer them too much.
You're a journalist.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that Fulham promotion at Wembley, that Joe Bryan double was a bit of a steal. So
you've always got
written my luck enough. But if we look at the other game quickly, Swansea versus Barnsley. Well, not too much on Swansea. I think brilliant, Steve Cooper, great job. Love the fact he's young English talent coming through. He obviously won the Under-17s World Cup, didn't he, with England? And you see that kind of reflected in his team. Just lots of young, great talent. They've got a good defence. Mark Way, their Chelsea loanee at centre-back. I think Thomas Tuchel will take a serious look at him next year before deciding what to do with him. Freddie Woodman in goal. He's only 24. Ben Cabango, he's now into the Welsh national side as the centre half there. Matt Grimes. Just a good, solid defensive team. I find it so funny that Andre Ayew's still their main striker. But he's he scored 16 this year, actually. So Swansea are an interesting proposition. But Barnsley, what have you made of Barnsley? Because they are easily one of the stories of the year, I think.
Well, absolutely out of nowhere, isn't it? I think it was last day of last season where they were odds on to go down, and everything that happened, they managed to stay up. And then, you have to keep looking at the table to double check that Barnsley are in the playoffs, and I back an underdog all the way, Henry. So I do hope that they can at least get to Wembley and really put on a show. But the whole background of the club's changed. The new manager in after they lost a beloved manager before. So is it Daryl Dike up front? Daryl
DK, yeah.
He's
a monster.
Yeah, and again, it's just identifying those key talents that they've brought in where other people may have snubbed them and put their nose up to them, and they've brought them in. And at the start of the season, many people wouldn't have them that. Well, no one would have them in the top half if they were being honest with their championship predictions. So to finish in the playoffs, and it was guaranteed, with two games to go, I think they could be a real dark horse going into this playoff.
Yeah, I agree with you. For people who haven't been following it too much, Barnsley, since they were bought by the Pacific Media Group in 2017, they've adopted that kind of data-driven approach that you see kind of becoming more popularised, Moneyball, as it were. Brentford follow a similar standard of practice, but their recruitment sort of level is much, much lower. If we look at one of their star players, Michael Helik at centre-back, he cost 800 grand out of Poland. Callum Britton cost barely anything from NK Dons. He's come in with 5 assists this year, both huge parts of that squad. And like you say, Daryl DK, he arrived on loan from Orlando City in January. He scored 9, which is you can't make up that kind of discovery. And he is one of the most powerful forwards I've seen in a long time. He's difficult to handle. But I mean, you touched on the manager there, Valerian Ismail. What do you think of him? 6% win rate since he come in. Found them almost rock bottom with 3 points from 6 games. That's just another unbelievable discovery. A bit like the Xisco one. He's come out of nowhere and just turned this team around.
Yeah, and I think especially the teams that they've beaten off to get to the playoffs as well. It's absolutely they just press high. They're in your face, and I really do think that they're dark horses for this playoff. Just because, even though the company line would be, we're taking these seriously and we won't write them off, I do think people will not know the full extent of what Barnsley can produce. And 1997, the first ever Premier League years I had on VHS, Henry, Barnsley were there. Neil Redfern didn't even have a roof on the stand. What we're on 25 years later, they could be back in the promised land. Yeah,
they've not finished higher than 14th in the Championship in over 20 years, and here we go. It's exciting for them. All right, let's. You're a man that knows what you're talking about. Let's try and predict these then.
Allegedly.
So, Brentford, Bournemouth. I think we're both going for Brentford. I agree with you. I'd love to see Barnsley get through against Swansea. Just more for romantic reasons than anything, isn't it? Are you agreeing with that? And then should we go for a Brentford versus Barnsley final?
I'd love to see that. I'd want both teams to go up. To be fair, you won't follow this narrative, but obviously the heartbreak for Brentford last season in the play, it just felt that everything that they had in the squad that they were going to go up. And then Barnsley, just to sort of, it's almost that Huddersfield Town story where Huddersfield Town were written off that one year for the playoffs, and they managed to, I think Huddersfield Town won the playoffs, semi-finals, final, without scoring a goal. So maybe that's something to look for Barnsley to do going forward. But I think I'll go Barnsley, Brentford, and then cut the fairy tale short and go for a Brentford promotion.
Oh yeah, I'd like to be different, but I think that is I think that's the correct way to go. But yeah, Barnsley, if you haven't already, go search them out because they are such an interesting team. All right, I thought we could have some fun and do some awards. Obviously, we still got the playoffs to go, but the regular season's over. We can still dish a few FD extra time awards out. So manager of the year. Feel free to add your input if there's anyone else you think I've missed in any of this. The 3 candidates I've gone for, Daniel Farke, Valerian Ismail and Zisco. If you had to pick a manager of the year out of the champ, who would it be?
I'm going to go Daniel Farke just because I think coming down after a relegation, many people could look at it and go, everything's in place for them to do that. But it's a remarkable achievement. Not just that, they finished 96, 97 points. Again, they could have been nearly topping a ton. They finished as champions. He's managed to manoeuvre around the muddy, tricky waters of players wanting to go. They've kept that core going, and they've still played the same way. They've absolutely smashed it. They've been a joy to watch, and like we both said earlier, I think they've got a real chance to kick on next season.
Oh no, well, I agree with everything you say, but I'm going to go for Valerian Ismail. I think what he's done at Barnsley is unreal. To sort of canter into the playoff places. He's my manager of the year, especially as they'd only got 3 points from 6 when he came in as well. I think that's just unreal. But yeah, Daniel Farke, either way, Daniel Farke's got a future at the top of the game, whatever happens, in my opinion. I think he was stand out in the Premier League, and he's quite clearly knows what he's talking about in the Championship too. So yeah, anyway, let's move on to the unsung manager of the season. Now, it's interesting. We did this top 10 biggest stories in the Championship, which I saw you commented on, which is very exciting. These are some of the guys that maybe we haven't spoken about enough. First candidate I'm putting forward, Nathan Jones at Luton, 12th in the Championship, 17 wins, 11 defeats, and the thing about this is he had an absolutely torrid time at Stoke, didn't he? Came back to Luton. The fans weren't sure if they even wanted him back, so it kind of left on acrimonious terms. But he helped them survive that season, and now he's gone and finished above Stoke City. I love Nathan Jones. I think I like that kind of match made in heaven between the two. And Luton, they're a small side of a small budget. They've got a new stadium, I think, in the pipeline on the way. It is quite exciting for them to be where they are.
Yeah, definitely. I felt so sorry for Nathan Jones at Stoke, and I really, really wanted to get him right. I think it was just like the post-match interviews where he was so raw, so honest and open, and that maybe it was just a little step far too early. And then coming back to Luton, absolutely smashed it. To finish mid-table with the resources that they've got, it is absolutely fantastic. And again, there'll be maybe potential suitors for him coming out of Luton, but like we've seen with Barnsley this year, who knows what they could produce. They're in the league for another season. He's a fantastic manager, and if they can get it right, you just never know.
I agree. I think it's appropriate that someone like Michael O'Neill has gone into Stoke to try and sort of steady the ship a little bit. He had almost an impossible task with that transition of squads there, wasn't it? Sort of half Premier League, half Championship, trying to balance that right, and a lot of egos, I imagine, going on at Stoke. But yeah, fair play to Nathan Jones. Someone else I put in, Mark Robbins for Coventry. First season back in the Championship. 16th place, not a standout campaign, but really good to see Coventry kick on. And obviously back at the Rico next year. Exciting news for everyone in Coventry, I'm sure. And now, the next candidate I've included is kind of one for you, to be honest. However, I think he should be here. Lee Bowyer. He's coming to Birmingham, and if you consider where Birmingham were, how amazed and satisfied are Birmingham fans with Lee Bowyer as a manager?
It doesn't take much to satisfy a Birmingham City fan, Henry. You get a man in who played for your club, who's sort of young and exciting, and who gets it. Aitor Karanka, his tactics were shoddy, his demeanour was absolutely awful. And the first game, Lee Bowyer brought in Lukas Jutkovic, who'd been out in the cold, not been anywhere near the first team, maybe on the bench. 3 minutes in, we're playing Reading, who were pushing for promotion in the playoffs. Ball in the back post, Duke heads it in. Football is very, very simple when you can get it right. And ever since then, that's what he's been doing. I don't think we had 16 points all calendar year this year, and then we got 16 points from 18 in that run of 6 games. It's so exciting. At one point, I was on a Blues podcast speaking about League One, and could we get out next season? Rotherham had 4 games in hand on us with about 3 points behind. So I know you put it in there to cater for me, and I do thank you for that. But he has done a remarkable job, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but I've got hope for next season, which always brings you back.
Nah, listen, I think the job he's done is pretty exceptional. What I love about Lee Bowyer is he was like a reluctant manager, wasn't he, at Charlton? He didn't really want to step up to the top job, did it, worked wonders there, couldn't quite pull it off with Charlton in the Championship, but he's obviously gone to Birmingham, former player. He just seems to get it a bit more, certainly than Ita Karanka. I mean, this must have been an exhausting campaign to be a Birmingham fan, because you've kind of witnessed it all, haven't you, from start to finish?
Yeah, well, you start the season, we had Brentford at home on the first game of the season, and we beat them 1-0. So any football fan that supports a team, my promotion drive was in absolutely overload. And then, yeah, it's just the tactics, the refusal to change. And then I think Harley Dean summed it up when he scored his first goal after Karanka with the shrug. And we've got a bit of hope. The ownership thing is probably another 2 podcasts that we could do, but it'd be very boring unless you support Birmingham City. So Lee Bowyer, absolutely fantastic, and hopefully we can build on the squad that we've got.
Nice one. All right, who would you go for as your unsung, almost personality manager of the season then?
I'm going to go for Nathan Jones, just because I really enjoy him as a personality, and then for him to go back to Luton and for him to keep on going, keep the ground running, and just 12th is an absolutely amazing achievement for Luton. And I don't want to overplay it, but they're back in the league, solid footing. They can plan for next season, and who knows, maybe get one of those playoff spots.
Couldn't agree more. And above Stoke as well, which I just find so funny. And now, next section, which could be a bit more controversial. Young player of the season. Now, the Championship is so good because it's just become this almost breeding ground from incredible players. Obviously, you have Jude Bellingham at Birmingham last year. I think Premier League clubs very seriously use it as a place to send some of their hot shots and see how they get on. Candidate A being a perfect example of that, Harvey Elliott, 18 years old. It's outrageous. 7 goals and 11 assists this year in a Blackburn side, which actually their league finish was a bit disappointing in the end, but quite exciting side going forwards. Serious amount of goals in that squad, certainly anyway, under Tony Mowbray. I love the fact that Lewis Holtby is putting strings in the middle as well. But Harvey Elliott, what do you make of him, and how high do you reckon his ceiling is?
Yeah, I mean, I went to a game. What would it have been? It'd been last season. Liverpool played MK Dons in the Carabao Cup, and Brewster and Harvey Elliott started, and I think it was Harvey Elliott's first senior start, but everyone was sort of focused on Brewster, and we sort of have seen where he's going. I mean, it would be welcoming him to the Championship next season, but Harvey Elliott has sort of had that move, young gone, and got the move to Blackburn. I think they finished in the bottom half with the positive goal difference, so attacking wise they've been absolutely brilliant, and he's been the key to that. So creative. Very mature for, 18 years old? 18. He can just knows to pick the right pass or knows to pick the right finish. So wherever he goes, whether it's a lower level Premier League club next season or another year in the Championship, like we've spoken about with the likes of Max Aarons, and we're going to speak on with Michael Elisa, just get that game time in. And if he's 18 and producing this, we've seen Jude Bellingham, fantastic footballer, but obviously centre mid's not as sexy. You're not getting the highlights like Harvey Elliott, and we've seen what he can do. And I really do think, in terms of quality, the Championship is just improving and improving. So who knows where it'll be.
Well, learn all his tricks at Fulham, if I remember correctly. That's so annoying that he decided to leave. Anyway, you just mentioned, I'd say the next candidate really, Michael Elise, Reading, another team that kind of came out of nowhere to be a bit of a flamboyant, outgoing side. Omar Richards on his way to Bayern Munich at the end of the season, but really the star of the show was Elise. 7 goals, 12 assists, 19. Frenchman. He's got something, doesn't he? He's a real talent. Yeah,
he brought that Reading side to light, especially early on. Came out of nowhere, but you heard about him, and I remember watching. I think a couple of games early on, and just so exciting for Reading, especially where they were last season. Again, they were fighting for relegation, and to sort of push them up the league, he's been a key in that. I don't think he'll be there next year. I don't think that's very surprising to say, but yeah, another one of those. I mean, the Championship's just building this absolute array of talent. When you look back on it, especially even like at the England squad now, most of those boys are featured or played in the Championship. So, like we said off air, Henry, it's that hotbed. If you want to find some hot young talent, get yourself down to the Championship.
No, it's nice. I also included Max Aarons as well because I think you've got to include someone from the Champions.
You forget how young he is, don't you?
Yes, it's unreal. 2 goals, 2 assists, 2.8 key pass and dribbles. Do whatever you want with those stats. It's exhausting sometimes. It's just the amount of times I've said key passes per 90. It's like, what am I on about? But no, I'm not going to discredit half of Football Daily's foundations. But is there any other like young talent that you think worth to mention? And if you had to choose like a young player of the season, who would it be?
I would look at Harvey Elliott just because that Blackburn side defensively was very shoddy. They finished the season with a positive goal difference in the bottom half of the league, and he's been a real bright light at 18, and another one of those people that we get in the Championship for a season, and you just hope he can crack on and use all his experience that he's learnt this year.
Yeah, I mean, it does help having some players like Adam Armstrong in front of him. Yeah, I think he assisted him like 5 times this season as well. I think Bradley Dack's been in and around the side there. So I'm going to go for Michael Elise. I think as sort of individual performances go, and certainly maybe having to carry a bit more weight on his shoulders, I'll go for him. But yeah, Harvey Elliott, watch that space, 18 years old. I think it was 17 going into the start of the season too. So yeah, all right, split opinions on that one. Player of the season. Ooh, could be a bit more interesting. Now, a lot of people have wanted me to mention Kiefer Moore for Cardiff City. Kiefer Moore Ballon d'Or, as he's becoming affectionately known. Who scored? Now, say what you want about their rating system, but they've got him above Toney in terms of his overall rating. He scored 20 this season, 1 assist, 10.5 aerial duel wins. Absolute giant. Look, I'm not saying he's been the player of the season, but he's pretty handy, isn't he? It looks like Wales have someone that could go to, at the Euros this summer. They have that kind of central figure who maybe Bale or the other younger talents could bounce off. I like Kiefer Moore a lot. I'm a big fan of him.
Yeah, definitely. I think, for me, it might have been the same as you, just doing this research. The goals speak for themselves, but then when you have a look on who scored, then everything around his game, and he's playing in a Mick McCarthy team, which doesn't get you out of bed in the morning sometimes. I think he's done exceptionally well, and if they can keep him for next season, again with that manager and that setup and everything for Cardiff, again they could be another contender for playoffs, if not a little bit more.
Okay, I love Mick McCarthy's little holiday at Applewell, Nicosia. Come back to,
I forgot about that. What a season we've had.
Rainy Cardiff and do the job. I love. Didn't he say, you can try and play football a million ways, but it's a very simple game. Kind of echoed what you said earlier. I love that sort of pragmatic approach. The other players worth mentioning, like I said, Adam Armstrong, 24 years old as well, 4.7 shots per game. It's pretty nuts. Buendia, 50 goals, 16 assists. I think the most creative player in the Championship by a country mile. I mean, I think a lot of football purists would give it to Buendia, sort of player of the season, based on his all-round attributes. But I just don't think you can. I don't think you can break the Championship goal-scoring record and not get player of the season. So I personally am going to give it to Ivan Toney. But I mean, would you agree with that, or do you think Buendia is just a better player and actually did have the best season? And because of his positioning, perhaps we're not holding him in the same light as Toney.
I would never call myself a football purist. If anything, I'm more of a Mick McCarthy, Neil Warnock, which is bad on my character, but I am going to go for Emi Buendia just because, Zidane the movie I think it's on Netflix now, following Zidane around for 90 minutes in a football game. Someone should have had a camera on Emi Buendia for all 46 games of the Championship. Absolute magician, doing things that this league has never seen, and
wow,
like we've said earlier, he can crack on and do even more, hopefully at Norwich and maybe even further, because all those Norwich boys are getting linked with not just moves to your West Hams and Evertons, but Barca's, Bayern's, Real Madrid. So, yeah, very exciting times ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about him going to Arsenal. I bet they're pretty gutted that didn't quite materialise if you look at some of their signings. All right, we'll split that then. Ivan Toney and Emi Buendia. And finally, just a little moment of the season. I was wondering if there was something that caught your eye, something you've seen on Twitter, anything that happened that made you smile a lot in the Championship this term.
I don't think it's very surprising at all, Henry. The moment of the season for me is when we sacked Aitor Karanka. He gave one of the worst post-match interviews I'd ever seen. where he just threw the squad under the bus. We were playing Reading, game of our lives. We needed the 3 points. Harley Dean, the captain, who had been thrown under that bus by Karanka, scores the winner, runs over to the Sky camera, very knowledgeable, and just gives him the old Karanka shrug, gives him the 2 fingers, and we welcome in the Lee Bowyer era.
Oh, mate, love that. I'm gonna go for the Akinfenwa penalty. I just think that was pretty special, wasn't it? On the score sheet in the Championship. Friend of the channel as well. And like I said, just big up to Wycombe for their season, and let's see how it goes. Will, I think that's pretty much everything for the Championship this year. Hopefully our Championship fans are satisfied. I think we've got more content on the way, but it's good to be shining a light. You know, still got the playoffs to go. Everything to look forward to, and it is a division that just seems to get stronger and stronger every season. So thank you, Will. I saw the other day you were interviewing Harry Kane, so a slight step down in stature in terms of your company today, but appreciate you being on. Is there anything that you want our viewers to go check out? Is there anything you've been working on which you're particularly excited about?
You know what? Let's just keep it Championship. If you're a Premier League fan, do not turn your nose up at the Championship, because, like we said, this is an absolute hotbed of not just talent but future England stars. So if you're going to watch Southampton Burnley maybe a lunchtime kickoff, forget about it. Get yourself across to the Championship, because you'll find the next big star on your radar, and you can say I saw him first.
Love that. Well, thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode of Extra Time Podcast. Make sure you are subscribed to us on your favourite podcast app or on Football Daily Podcast on YouTube. Thank you once again to Will Brazier. Real pleasure, and we'll see you all next time.